for the Alien Conspiracy Podcast. We are your hosts, Agent Ether
and Agent Anderson. Come along as we examine UFO sightings, conspiracies, and all things strange. You can follow the show on Twitter at AlienConPod. We also have an email address, alienconpod@protonmail.com. We would love to hear from you. And don't forget to check out all of our other links in the description under the link tree. I recommend the Discord. This week's episode, Project Bluebook, Part 5. Or should I say, From the Files of Project Bluebook, Part 5. I messed that up. Oh well.
You know, I was waiting for Agent ETA to do his entrance. I almost missed it.
Yeah, he's not here. So I got some good news and some bad news. The bad news is that Agent ETA is sick and he won't be on the show. The good news is got all the dead weight is gone. All the useless people who contribute nothing. We have only the best agents for you tonight.
Well, I thank you, I guess.
No riffraff, no shenanigans.
People like the riffraff shenanigans.
Just pure, I know, I'm just talking shit because...
I'm going to tell him.
Because ETA is not going to listen to this probably, so I can say whatever I want.
Well, I'm going to tell him, though.
ETA is a complete degenerate. He adds nothing to the show, and I'm glad he's not here. No, I'm just kidding.
Wow. You're in a mood.
That's harsh, huh? I know, yeah. Right? No, just kidding. He's real sick and he can't make it, unfortunately, so he can't be here. But hopefully next week, But anyways, this week's episode, I was on vacation over the weekend, and I just sort of was not doing show stuff because I was on vacation. So I didn't do the normal stuff that I normally do for the show. Like I'm a little behind on the edits. So for all of our Patreon people, I apologize for the lack of early access. I am going to edit that stuff shortly. And also apologizing to the top tier who did not get to vote on this week's topic because I didn't make one. But so next week there will definitely be a vote. And as far as the voting goes, it's not necessarily going to be every single time. For example, we have episode number 150 coming up pretty soon here. And somebody said, dude, episode 150, you should do something special for that. So I was thinking of doing, like for episode 150, instead of doing a regular case file, we could look back on all of the previous case files and talk about like our favorites or discuss some of them or whatever. Just do sort of like a, like a greatest hits kind of a show.
That is a really fun idea.
I thought it'd be a lot of fun to do something like that. So... Hey, shut up, Agent Redacted. Go to your room. No, it was actually Agent Redacted's idea. But,
was it really?
Yeah, that's why he's saying it's stupid. He's being funny. But so that's an example. Other times there might be something that is timely, like the Georgia Guidestones. So there are going to be certain times when we can't or don't do the vote. But in general, I'm going to try to do the vote at least twice a month.
Can I vote?
Well, yeah, if you join our Patreon.
I'm not entirely unlike a Patreon subscriber.
That's true, but if you want to vote, you have to vote. You have to join the Patreon to vote. So, if you're on the show, that's cool.
It seems redundant.
but you don't get a vote. I don't get a vote. Nobody gets a vote unless you're a Patreon. So I do get to choose the topics though that people get to vote on. So it's sort of cheating, I guess. But hey, somebody's got to choose them. Right now we're just doing 2 different topics, but to vote from. But the more people there are, the more topics we can have to select from. And I'm still bummed that nobody chose. Not even a single person voted for the Yule cat from Iceland. So maybe we'll skip the vote and do that one, or maybe we'll do Christmas themed cryptids or something for the holidays. I don't know.
That reminds me, there's an Amazon commercial out, not to, spotlight Amazon or anything, but it involves a Yeti.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
No.
Oh, Yetis get lonely at Christmas, apparently.
Yeah. Well, hey, look, I hate Jeff Bezos as much as the next guy, but they have a really good program for affiliates. So,
He just announced, I think he's going to donate a ton of money to charity.
Yeah. Hopefully he does. Hopefully he follows through. That'd be great. I'm sure that money could really help a lot of people. And
we shall see.
And we will see. Maybe he reached a point in his life where he's like, dude, I've bought like all the yachts. all the jets, he's bought everything he can possibly buy and it's still barely made a dent. And he's like, well, give some of it away, I guess. I don't know what to do with all this, He's been so wildly successful with his company, maybe pay his employees a little bit more. Nah, never do that. All right. Well, anyways, let's forget about Jeff Bezos. Let's get to the episode. This time we're doing Project Bluebook, and I really, really like these episodes, Project Bluebook, because there are so many good cases filed away that nobody ever looks at. Like, you can go on Fold 3 and it'll tell you how many people have looked at this specific file. And I'm always shocked to see that some of the files, like 10 people, this file's been accessed 10 times, like total. It's like, basically nobody's looking at these things, like nobody. And I find that surprising and a little sad because of the volume of just bizarre and crazy and outrageous and just all the really cool stuff in there that nobody's looking at. So I'll look at it for you and find some of the good stuff. It turns out it's not that hard to find the good stuff because a lot of it is good stuff.
Well said.
Yeah, well, thank you. I chose to look at 1966 just because it was the busiest year. Bluebook has over 12,000 files on Fold 3 for 1966 alone. And the first episode we did, the Michigan Swamp Gas was from 1966. It was a big year for UFOs. Got nothing?
I think I wasn't around for episode 1. I do want to say that I listened to it and it's so different.
Yes.
From the feel of the episode, the flavor that you're doing now, but it's still a really good episode.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Yeah. In the early days, I wanted to do more of like a documentary style and more scripted, but I found that overall, I started, the first 2 episodes were by myself, and then I was having a phone conversation with ETA, and we just so happened to be talking about some conspiracy type nonsense, as we do. And I had been thinking, it'd be nice to have a co-host. I wonder who the co-host could be. And then like halfway through the conversation, I realized like, holy shit, I should see if ETA wants to come on. It just hadn't occurred to me. I don't know why, for whatever reason. I guess I'm kind of a dumbass. But yeah, and then he came on the show and that changed the whole dynamic of everything. And in addition, the first 2 episodes I did more like I did sound effects and stuff like that, which I wanted to do more of a scripted thing like that, but it takes a lot of time to edit all that stuff, like those sound effects and, the writing out the script and everything. It just takes a ton of time. And it's just not possible to do a weekly show. I could do a monthly show doing it like that, but definitely not a weekly. But also, when you have more people on the show, it's just more fun to do it non-scripted, just to do like a conversational style. Lots of fun to do it that way. So that's why we sort of transitioned over to that. And of course, we used to do a non-explicit show, but Agent ETA is very explicit and he's pretty funny too. So I figured at some point, I was like, well, this is just too funny to edit out all of his explicit stuff. So I decided to keep it in at some point. So now we have the show that we have, for better or worse.
Well, I like it.
Well, thanks. I like it too. Yeah. Actually, originally, Agent Ether was sort of looking at me cross-eyed, like, you're doing a show about what? And she didn't really get it. But then she listened, just so happened to listen to one of the episodes with me, ETA, and Kruger. That might have been one of the first episodes she ever listened to, actually, because she was sort of like, you're doing a show about what? Okay, whatever. I don't care. Just thinking the whole thing's kind of, but then she listened to the show and heard how much fun we were having doing it. And that, and I guess like, we're not like we're not like Dan Aykroyd balls deep on this show. We're sort of maybe slightly more casual than that. So I think once she realized what the show was and how we're having fun and whatever, then she's like, can I come on? And I had told her before, I was like, you're never coming on my show. Your S's are just too brutal. I can't deal with it.
Oh, please.
So I actually, when she came on, I actually bought a better de-esser for her, just for her S's. But anyways, all right, let's get to this week's topic, Project Bluebook.
Wow, you just ETA and then me.
Yeah, I know. I'm in a mood, right?
Yeah.
But you're actually here to defend yourself, though. No, but actually, she's a really good contributor to the show because she actually is a real life physicist. So we can throw some science stuff at her once in a while and be like, hey, is this like real? Are they just making this up? Is this real science? I don't know. I'm not a scientist, so she can answer that stuff sometimes. And also, it's good to have the female perspective as well, because you don't want all to be a boys' club. You want it to be more people involved, have different perspectives. So that's fun as well. So we get two main advantages for having her on the show is that she's a real life
No,
scientist
I just think I'm awesome.
and a real life woman and awesome. All right. Anyways, that's okay. Quite the intro. Let's get into some case files. I didn't know where to start. There's 12,000 of the damn things in 1966. So I said, let's just start at the beginning. So I just started near the beginning looking at files. The first one I have is on the 7th of January, 1966. And then it has a time is 07/2130Z, which I'm assuming is Zulu time. And the file itself is 3 miles southwest of Georgetown, Alabama, on Highway 63. The description, this is the cover card. It's one object seen for 1 to 2 minutes, and it's a ground visual sighting. Now, the conclusion given is other psychological. When I'm looking through the files, now, many times when people are talking about Project Bluebook, they will talk about the percentage of files that are labeled as unknown. I forget that exact percentage. Let's say it's 10% or something. So a lot of people talk about the files as if 90% of them aren't really worth considering. It's the 10% that are the cream of the crop. Now, looking through these, I can tell you from my own personal experience and in my opinion that there is almost no difference between the files labeled as psychological or whatever or unknown. The ones marked unknown, it seems almost random which ones they mark unknown, because quite a lot of the files that are marked as solved in some way or other, whether they solve it as an aircraft or whatever, quite a lot of those, if you actually read the file instead of the summary card, the conclusion does not match the witness statements at all.
Also, a lot of times for the files, it'll say conclusion unknown, but then it's similar. The whole case file is similar to another case where they come to the conclusion that it's psychological or Venus or an aircraft. And you're like, how are these two cases different that they have different conclusions? They're not. They're like the same case.
Yeah.
With different conclusions.
Right. Sometimes the same case.
Yeah.
With different. Exactly. Yeah. So when I look through these files, and if you listening to this decide to look through the files, which I would encourage you to do, don't look at the card and don't dismiss something if it says the conclusion is something mundane like an aircraft or a meteor or whatever. Although, to be fair, many of the cases where it concludes the sighting was due to a meteor does appear to actually be due to a meteor. That does appear to be the most reliable one as far as conclusions. But if you look at if it's got like a 25-page file about a meteor, it's probably not a meteor. It's probably something a little stranger than that. But anyways, I just wanted to throw that out there because this one is concluded as psychological. And usually, so often if it says psychological and you read it, you're like, yeah, this does seem a little sus, but sometimes it's marked psychological and you're like, where did they get that from? So in this case, the summary card says, observers saw a round object with a diameter of 10 to 12 feet. Object had a ring or hoop extending out 8 to 10 inches around the center horizontal. It had a 5 to 6 foot hatch located on the bottom. Sounded like a turbine engine, and the odor, it says odor, but it's a typo. I think they meant order. And I just wanted to point out that there are typos in the file, and that's important because I've seen typos in government documents before, and it might sound like nitpicking, but there are some words that if mistyped, an entire case could hinge upon. So it's important to understand that these files do have many typos if you're looking through them or you haven't seen government files in general before, because you might see something that's like, that's crazy, but it's not crazy. It's just a typo sometimes. Or maybe it's a typo or whatever. It could go either way. Anyways, so the order, so the original was order. The typo was order and the word was odor. So the odor of sulfur or rotten eggs was present. Observer also stated that his watch stopped at 15:27 CST. That's the detail that really caught my attention because there's a lot of cases where watches stop. It's a classic trope. If you're watching X-Files or a UFO movie, it shows up all the time in those movies, but it's not that common in UFO cases. You do see it on occasion, but it's not super common. It's a little unusual. So that's what really caught my attention about this particular case. He saw the object for 1 to 2 minutes while it hovered 5 feet above the ground and 20 feet from the observer. Then it accelerated and disappeared in a few seconds. The object also had a cone on top 8 to 10 inches high with a blinking green light. So you're thinking, that's a little weird, and they went and interviewed him and thought he was crazy. Okay, fine. Further details from the file. It disappeared in a gradual climb to the north-northeast after the engine got louder, then left with a very rapid acceleration, and it disappeared due to distance. So it didn't go behind or above or whatever, it just faded away as it got further and further away. The witness was a civilian, age 18, student, and in the file it says that the character references said that he was very reliable. So what they do, we've talked about this before, but when they do, what they would do investigating these is they would send somebody out and they would spend quite a lot of time asking around about the person. Is this person prone to telling tall tales? Do they lie a lot? Are they crazy or whatever? And they would get a lot of character references for the person. So if they say in the file that this person is very reliable, that means that they talked to a lot of people who said that he was an upstanding citizen who was not one to lie. And they really look for evidence of this person being an unreliable witness. They spend more time on that than they do the actual case in some cases. So another quote from the file, an on-the-spot survey of the area where the UFO hovered did not reveal any evidence of heat, wind blast, etc. Also, local RAPCON was queried as to any unusual radar sightings. Negative results. The witness appeared to be reliable, which was confirmed by character witnesses, and his instructions on how to get to the rural area were very accurate. So in other words, this guy was, one of these people who was very clear on what he said. At the bottom of the 4th page of the file, at the top of the page, it says 3 of 3, but it's page 4 of the Fold 3 file because the cover page is, the first page. It says, note, advance copy delivered to the DIA. And like, why would they send this to the DIA if it's just psychological, right? That's kind of weird. Why would the DIA want this at all? And I'm thinking, maybe I want to send the DIA a FOIA request as to what they have on this particular case. It's really weird. But anyways, there's a memo on page 5 of the record, and this is a memo from the 12th of January, 66, and it says, received a call from Buckley Air Force Base, Alabama. FAA had nothing in the air below 1,800 feet. Navy did not have any aircraft in the area. Highway 63 is not heavily traveled. There is no house within 1 mile of the place where the boy saw the object. There was no dried grass on either side of the highway. The object went away from the sun, and that's what it says. And nothing in this file indicates why or how they concluded it was psychological. It just seems like, well, we hit our quota for unknowns this month, so we got to say that this is psychological or whatever. Like, there's no indication. It's just completely made up.
And it's interesting to me how thoroughly it seems that they investigated the case.
Right.
Going so far as to contact local military and see if there are any crafts in the area.
Yeah, and this is the Air Force, so that's why it said the FAA. They contacted the FAA and the Navy because the Air Force already it's already internal to them, but nobody knew what it was. Nobody had anything that could account for it, so it's basically an unknown. It's a real UFO. It's a weird thing, and you see the description. You see it has like hatches and things like that. It sounds like a man-made craft, and yet we don't have any craft that can account for it. So it's kind of weird, and it did display movement characteristics that seem to defy the laws of physics. So it does line up with a lot of other UFO sightings around the time. And, around this time in 1966, there were a whole ton of sightings. And keep in mind that there was 12,000 in the file. That's just the ones that reported. We've talked about this on the show before. I mean, it could be for every sighting, there's 10 that weren't reported, So who knows how many people saw stuff at the time. All right, Agent Ether, did you want me to do another one?
You said you had 4?
I don't know. I have 8 pages total of notes.
Dear God.
Well,
I'm just
usually
teasing.
usually Kruger's busy at work, and ETA doesn't always have the time or inclination to do a lot of notes. So, and sometimes you're busy at work, so I have to assume that I'm going to have to do a lot of the talking, so I just do a lot of notes.
Okay, well, I can go.
Okay.
I was looking for cases around Thanksgiving
Oh, okay.
because Thanksgiving is coming up, but there actually weren't a ton. And the ones that there were, it was around Thanksgiving and they were very short. And then I stumbled across a case file and it was 100 pages. And I was like, wow, that's good. That'll bring me through the episode. 100 pages to look through.
Yeah, that's a big boy file right there.
Yeah. And I was like, well, if it's 100 pages and there's so much information and there's multiple sightings, there's bound to be something out there on the interwebs. This can't be the only resource for this sighting. And yet it was. And I also found that very interesting. So I'd like to talk about it.
Yeah, that's always surprising to me too when that's the case.
Well, between November 6th and November 16th in 1957, there was actually a UFO wave. So we call that what, a flap?
Generally, well, it depends. Sometimes it's a wave, sometimes it's a flap, and I have not yet been able to figure out why which is used when.
Well, there were a bunch of sightings in Shiroi, Japan, at the Air Force Base, and also at the Johnson Air Force Base. And those two Air Force bases are about 26 miles apart. They were established after World War II. They're not operational anymore in that we don't have bases specifically in those locations, although we do have bases in Japan. Shiroi became a training center for Japanese self-defense, and I actually couldn't find anything about the Johnson Air Force Base except that it existed and it was a historical base at some time.
Well, sometimes, at least back in the day, they used to have, remember, radar was pretty primitive back then, and a lot of stuff was, they might have a little sub base just for the radar, So
Sure.
it might not have been like an actual air base. I've seen that before with different cases. You'd have, instead of having one big base, they'd have smaller bases that were more specific to a certain thing,
Makes sense. I looked through these case files, though, and there were no witness statements or mention of the Johnson Air Force Base beyond the title page, except there were tons of maps and there were outlines pinpointing the bases like latitude and longitude. There were detailed layouts of each building. They were thoroughly labeled. I mean, pages and pages, and of both bases.
Interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. And they weren't labeled with sightings. They were just the layouts of the buildings.
Just the layouts.
Mhm.
Weird. Okay.
And some things were handwritten on the layouts, like gym, marshal's office, front office, that sort of thing. Some handwriting on the layouts.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. The first page of the document, it's cut off, but at the bottom it says, this document contains information affecting the national defense of the United States.
Ooh.
I know. So somebody's taking it seriously. The first few pages are actually a summary or overview, not necessarily case files, but a summary of a translation from, I'm going to try and say this newspaper, Shamuri Shimbun.
Say what?
I didn't want to mispronounce it. So I went on the Googly machine and I put it in and I listened to the pronunciation and it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, it sounds very pretty and like nothing I can pronounce. But it's a newspaper. It's been circulating since 1874. And in 2021, it was circulating for 7 million people. So it was one of the largest circulating papers, I think, not just in Japan, but in the world.
Yeah, that's a pretty good circulation, I think.
It tends to be more conservative leaning, but still been around a long time. So I think it's interesting that it's conservative leaning, and yet they still had these interviews with all these witnesses in regards to this UFO flap back in 1957.
Yeah. Well, hey, man, everybody likes UFOs, even the conservatives, right?
Yeah.
The liberals, the moderates, the centrists, the libertarians. I don't know who else is there. The Green Party, whatever. They all like them.
So this is a sad story. I'm getting older, and in order to read, I have to alternate between taking my glasses on, taking them off, and putting them on. I think I need to just go get reading glasses. It's terrible. I'm like, I think I need them. It's time.
To be fair, these files are not easy to read.
That's true. That's true. Thank you for coming to my defense. Yeah. All right. So I'm looking at a file here. It's the first page of the 100 pages. And it says that they interviewed 14 individuals, 8 of which were U.S. Air Force personnel, and 3 which were Japanese nationals. And they also said there were 3 people they couldn't interview because they had the flu.
What?
Yeah, and I thought that was kind of interesting. I think they didn't have the flu. I think it was more like, I'm not talking about this.
Yeah.
I'm too sick to talk about this. But then they go and they list the people, the civilians that have the flu. Like Weird. It's not redacted. Like the 3 civilians are just in there with all their information. So
yeah, quite a lot of it. Yeah, we've talked about that before. Like how some stuff is redacted, quite a lot is not.
All right. So one of the people interviewed was Sergeant Laybourne, and I found it interesting. He actually had a previous experience in Thanksgiving of 1951. He was driving his car with his wife somewhere between Vacaville and Auburn, California, which is actually really close to us.
Hey, I know where that is.
Yeah, exactly. And it was near Travis Air Force Base.
Okay.
When he saw something. It doesn't really describe what. He just says that he had sighted something around Thanksgiving. So unfortunately, it does not go into detail.
That's all they give, huh?
Yeah, no details.
I wonder if there's a separate file on that.
I looked for a lot of things. I did not see a separate file, but maybe I should look harder.
Interesting. Well, we know for a fact that there was a whole separate reporting arm of the military for UFOs outside of Project Bluebook. So maybe he submitted it to that.
It doesn't necessarily say he submitted it in as much as he said he had this experience. So I don't think he necessarily reported it. I think he was sharing.
Oh, I see.
In the, when they asked him in the interview that he had a similar experience. So other people who they interviewed were glasses off. Mr. Can you edit that? Just bloop, flag it.
I guess. What do you want me to edit out? Just
that part. You'll know. Just click the edit.
Sure, I'll edit that right out.
Put the flag on. You're so mean.
No, what are you talking? I don't know what you're talking about. I'm going to edit that out.
All right, I'm going to skip names is what I'm going to do because I can't pronounce them. So there was a student, and they give his address in Tokyo. And on November 10th at 5:55, he was out in the street and he saw a green light and a reddish fireball flying over the Haneda airport for a few seconds. It finally exploded, emitting a shower of sparks, but there was no sound.
That's weird.
Yeah, it was. And then same date, November 10th, there was an employee at Tomoto Camera Works, and he saw something very similar flying in a southeasterly direction with a pale tail light. On the same day, we have a Mrs. Takahara, and around the same time, she was, on a bus, and she saw an egg flying in the southwesterly direction, leaving a red tail until it fell in pieces like a star scrapes, splitting silently. That's what it
Huh.
says. Yeah.
An egg.
An egg. Yeah, she describes it as an egg. So that's a little different than the other descriptions. But so far we have that it had a tail. Several of the witnesses described it as being green, and several described it as exploding.
Yeah. So we have multiple independent witnesses there.
We do. And one witness, the next witness, says the size was that of a closed fist. So he's looking up in the sky, and it's about the size of a closed fist. It was right below the horizon where Venus was. It was an intense blue-white light. It emitted sparks, and then it exploded into 3 pieces and disappeared, and the explosion was not heard.
Huh.
Apparently, there were a ton of telephone calls made to the Tokyo Astronomical Observatory. They said that various people were reporting flying objects. The time of the observations were, very similar. And they concluded that maybe it was a meteor, which sounds reasonable, right?
Not really.
Maybe it's reasonable. But the problem I have with this is I'm going to go on to talk about other sightings on different days, and they can't all be meteors.
Even that one doesn't sound like a meteor, to be honest. I mean, I guess if you cherry pick some of the details, but if you actually listen to what the witnesses are reporting, does not sound like a meteor to me.
So I also have farmers, some students, and a member of the Nagoya District Astronomical Observatory who all saw a fireball leaving a tail about 2 meters long. So tons of witnesses saying
Now, by 2 meters, do you mean 2 meters in the sky?
I think, 2 meters in the sky.
Or do they mean like literally 2 meters?
No, I think it's 2 meters.
2 meters in the sky, that's a pretty big trail. That's going to be huge.
Now, this is interesting. Here, it says there were photos. Somebody took photos and sent them in to the Japan Flying Saucer Research Society representative, Kenichi. Now, I looked around, but of course I could not find these photos. Oh, and then it talks about, I was going to ask you about this. It talks about angel hair. Have you heard of this phenomena?
Oh, yeah.
So I am not familiar. A lot of the times when I'm researching something, it's for the first time because I wasn't a big UFO buff before I started doing the show. So everything's new to me. So these files here where they transition from the interviews to this, what I'm talking about now, the subject, there's missing data.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden we're talking about these people, we're looking at the fact that it could be a meteor, and then suddenly it's talking about glass fibers falling from the sky. And it describes it as tinsel, it's disintegrating, and they call it angel hair. So tell me about this angel hair.
So I don't know a ton about it. I haven't really done the deep dive, but there have been reports from various places in the world of this sort of generally described as like a cobweb or spider web like material, and it will fall and, like you said, disintegrate. And there have been cases where there have been natural causes for this, but there have been other cases where it's hard to ascribe it or whatever to a natural phenomenon. It's sort of a mystery, but I'm not super knowledgeable about it, but I have heard of it before.
Okay.
And it's often associated with, things like UFOs or other strange sightings, perhaps supernatural. Some people think it literally is coming from the heavens. There's all sorts of theories around it.
I read it that some people think it's like a byproduct.
Right.
Of UFO activity.
Yeah, or other types of activity like paranormal activity.
So then this supplemental form is coming to an end, and they're reaching a conclusion here. And it says that the newspaper's conservative, slightly rightish, but they write news to be sensational, to get circulation. And so you can't really take it seriously because it's written primarily to appeal to the population. not to actually give correct news.
Okay. So that's something specific to that time in Japan.
Well, I feel like it's an excuse though. They're saying
Yeah.
these eyewitnesses, these stories are being sensationalized because that's the way newspapers operate. Problem?
What is that?
Peter.
Oh, okay.
Anyways, so yeah, so I feel like it's more of an excuse rather than investigating these statements. They're just coming to this conclusion. It's an easy conclusion,
Yeah.
but it doesn't explain the sightings.
Right. Yeah, that is a convenient excuse. But it does remind me also of, I think it was in the 1800s in America, there were certain, like, even prominent newspapers would publish stories that would be far-fetched, but it would be understood by people reading it that it was a make-believe story. Like, it was, people just knew that it was a thing. But on the other hand, if we have a file in Project Bluebook with like actual witnesses and stuff, that sort of makes me think that might not be the case in this case.
So, other than this specific event, which a lot of the government and the Astronomical Society in Japan concluded was a meteor, we also have other sightings, and they're described to us in the U.S. Air Force technical information sheets. So, it starts off with a summary, and the name is redacted. The date is November 15th, 1957. And it was actually really hard to read. It was very light, and it's in cursive handwriting, but I managed to translate most of it, I think.
It's in English, but by translate, she means it is in cursive and it is really hard to read.
It was. So this person, whoever they may be, sounds like they were at the top of the food chain. Somebody in command. And I think you'll be able to hear that in when I read the statement and understand what I'm saying. So at approximately 7:45 on November 8th, 1957, this person was informed by two other people. And I'm not familiar with military terms A/C and CQ. I'm assuming those are specific ranks.
What was that again?
So one of them before the name, it was A/C.
Okay.
And the other one before the name, it was CQ.
CQ and AC.
Yeah, I just know it's going to stand for some sort of like corporal lieutenant or something like that.
Airman corporal? And CQ, I don't know.
It's also hard to read, so they could,
Yeah.
and I could not make out the names. But anyways, they came into his office to tell him that there was a large object like a searchlight in the sky that was moving around. And so he went out with someone else. So he drags whoever's in his office with him, and they all go out and they're looking at this object, and they look up at it for about 10 minutes. He goes back in his office, doesn't say why, comes back out, and it's moving, and he's noticing it move. So I think it's moving in one direction, not zigzagging around. And the reason I think this is because he starts to give descriptions of the movement in terms of this specific way. He writes, for example, T601 to T604. And it took me a couple minutes, but I had been looking at the maps and the layouts of the bases, and I realized he is noting the position and movement of the object based on the buildings
Oh,
that
really?
he's looking at. That's what I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
So I got all excited because I figured that out. I was like, oh. So in the period, you could calculate, if you had more information, I think, how fast the object was moving based on how far apart the buildings were. So he kept coming out and going back in every 10 minutes, recording the movement. And then he said either he left and did not return or the object left and did not return. It wasn't clear.
So we have Diamond in the Discord chat has helped us out here. He says, what does AC mean in military? And it says active component.
Active corporal?
This says component. And it says CQ stands for change of quarters.
Huh.
So I'm not sure if that applies to this particular statement.
I don't know. I don't know. It's like I said, it's very hard to read.
It is. She asked me to help her earlier, and I was like, I can't tell. I couldn't make it out any better than she can.
For example, here's a name with a designation, and it's A/3C. It looks like Brown, and then a series of numbers, which might be his serviceman numbers, his unit number. I don't know.
A3C might be Airman Third Class.
Look at you.
I mean, that's what I would guess for that one.
Yeah, that makes sense since we're talking about Air Force bases.
Oh, there's also they're Mr. Pong says air conditioning control quality. And then here's okay, so CQ charge of quarters is a tasked duty in which a United States Armed Forces service member is to guard the front entrance of the barracks. Oh.
Well, that makes sense that he would go and report something then to his higher up.
That would be like the watchman, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, good find there, Diamond. Awesome.
Thank you for the help.
Yeah.
Yes, so that's what I have for this specific. Hold on, I'm dropping my papers because I have so many. That's what I have for this specific information sheet. I also have technical information sheets, which are the standard forms that people fill out that we've talked about before when they have a sighting, where it's a series of questions.
Yeah.
And they are standardized to try and, I think, normalize and keep track of the different variables when it comes to UFO sightings.
Yeah, this questionnaire is actually really, really good. It's designed specifically to get somebody who's just an average observer, to get them to give you like scientific data. You know, it's a really good questionnaire, like really, really good.
We should post a copy of it somewhere so people can see what we mean. But
hey, people could fill out their own Bluebook files.
That would be so much fun. We should do that.
That would be so cool. And they could send them to the show, or I don't know where you would send them. There's no more Project Bluebook, but it's a really good questionnaire, and that would be so much fun.
Yeah.
It's such a good questionnaire that I'd say it's still very usable these days, even though it's so many years later.
So this questionnaire, like the rest of the file, is hard to read, but I think I got the pertinent information from it. So this was a sighting that occurred on November 7th, same year, 1957. It was about 6:30 p.m. And this was at the Japanese Air Force Base, Shiroi. I paused because I think they write down the building number here where they're at, but it's hard to see. I think it says APO 73. So I think that's actually somewhere on the base. He observed this for 2 hours total, and this was in the complete dark. There was apparently no trace of daylight. Looking at the next page, he described it as a white, thin rod that was like a bright star.
And then if ETA was here, he would say...
Oh, gosh, he really would.
He would say, never mind.
So there was bright moonlight, but the object was still brighter than the background of the sky. It changed in brightness. It seemed to stand still at times, and it flickered and pulsated. Moving on to the next page, to pertinent information. It said that, he was outside and he just happened to look up and he saw the object in the southwest. He then draws a pretty picture of where he thinks he saw it, but this to me is interesting. The question basically is to compare the size of the object in the sky to an object. So you have choices like a nickel or a quarter or a grapefruit or a basketball. And he has that it was the size of a silver dollar.
Wow.
So it was big.
At arm's length.
At arm's length.
That's huge.
Yeah, it certainly isn't a star.
No.
And he described it as like a car headlight.
Huh.
So that I thought was the most interesting part of the whole report, of his statement.
Yeah.
Was the size of the object.
That would be massive, something in the sky that big.
So he's out there hanging out, happens to look up, sees this really bright, massive object. Let's see. Oh, it continues. Let's see. It looks like he filed the report on the same day, which I thought was interesting. So he saw it and he went and reported it right away. And they probably had him fill out this form because he was on the Air Force Base.
Yeah, I remember this is back in the day when at some point the government actually said, please send us your UFO reports, until they got so many. They're like, okay, stop. You can stop now. We've got enough. Got enough to last us forever. We don't need any more UFO reports.
And on this page, it actually says he was there with two other witnesses.
Hmm.
So he didn't see it by himself.
Okay.
Let's see. And then he draws where he was relative to the object. And that's the end of his observation, his
Okay.
observational report. On the same day, we have a second report.
Okay.
So same day, around 7 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the evening. And again, it describes the place as PMO Shiroy Air Force Base. So I don't know what the PMO is. Maybe it's the building, maybe it's something else. He observed it for 5 minutes. Let's see, switching the page. There was no moonlight. It was about a block away. So if he looked up in the sky, he estimated it was a block away.
That's pretty close.
Pretty close, yeah.
That's too close. I like my UFOs to be very far away. Preferably in space, and you're just seeing a reflection.
He said it made no sound and it had a color like a star. It was above the dining hall and disappeared towards the direction of where the transmitters were. Transmitter antenna. So I guess there was some sort of transmitter antenna on base.
Yeah, I'm sure all bases have them.
And it disappeared over in that direction. So it was moving, obviously. Let's see. And then I think the rest of the pages are missing.
Oh, no.
I know, but then there's other sightings too. There's a sighting on November 6th, but again, most of the pages are missing. And then I was looking just for general information that wasn't on the Air Force bases, but that was just in Japan around the same time, because sometimes they show up in Project Bluebook, even though it's supposed to be mostly for the United States.
Mm-hmm.
It'll list sightings. So I found November 6th, a sighting in the Air Force Base, Shiro Air Force Base, and it just has the conclusion as a meteor. So it's like kind of like a line item. It has the dates. It has every place in the world that they have a case file for and the conclusion. So date, location, conclusion, like line items. So I just went through for November and I looked for Japan. So there's a sighting on November 6th. They say it's a meteor. November 7th, Venus. And November 10th, insufficient data.
Oh, I thought you were going to say a weather balloon.
No, and I didn't see any case files here for November 10th, and that was at the Air Force Base. So there were more sightings
than
are represented here in what I happen to have shared.
Well, I've looking through these files before. I've seen files like that I've been looking for. It'll just be stuck halfway through a completely different case. You'll just find what you're looking for. You're like, well, this is what I was looking for, but it's filed under a completely different case file. Or you'll see files where there are certain pages that are just repeated, or they're out of order, or they're in reverse order, or whatever. The files are in a very bad state of organization. And I did read, I think it was in Ruppelt's book or whatever, that they did get some pages or files were damaged over the years, which I'm sure was the case even after he was there. So it's unfortunate, but on the other hand, the pages that are missing from your file could be there. They just could be in a different year, a different month, a different something.
Yeah, that's actually true. Well, at first I thought they were duplicates because they had the same dates. November 7th, there were a lot of sightings. And I was like, oh, these are duplicates. I've already printed them out. But no, they were separate reports of different sightings from different people.
Okay.
So I thought that was interesting. So here next I have the Air Intelligence Evaluation Record, and it's dated November 13th by one Captain J.A. Calhoun. And I'm not quite sure what it's supposed to be a report about. It just says this report is too general. I have no idea what that means. It says it does not contain sufficient data, so he can't draw a conclusion. I'm like, well, that's not very helpful.
That's pretty typical of a lot of these.
However, he says that they should exhaust all efforts to identify these UFOs because they could be a threat. He says that he couldn't obtain all the data. And let's see. And he says there's always a considerable amount of air traffic crisscrossing Japan. So he thinks that might be explaining a lot of it. He says he's suspicious and thinks most of these sightings are actually aircraft, especially, he says, if it's reported by locals.
What? Oh, yeah. These locals in Japan have never seen an airplane before. So,
and I like this one too. The reporting of the colored light streaming across the sky of Tokyo has little value. Although, admittedly, it could have been a meteorite. It cannot be. Oh, I can't read it. We must go ahead and rely on the overseas facilities reporting the sightings. So I don't know. It's just such a generic report. I'm not sure why it even exists or what the military would do with it. You know, it basically just says, well, I don't know, meteorites, aircraft. We should investigate, I guess. Don't trust the locals.
Weird.
It seemed kind of weird to me.
Sometimes on these files, you'll see like weird little things on there, either handwritten or a note that catches your attention. Like that one I said earlier that it was psychological, and yet they sent it to the DIA. You're like, that's weird. It's not every file that you see a note that says it was sent to the DIA. So I was like, that's really weird. So I don't know if there's some details on the files like that you might see.
All right, let me put my glasses back on. I think mostly I needed them off because, like you said, the files from Project Bluebook are so hard to read.
Some of them are pretty good. Some of them are like faded looking, and it's really quite difficult to read them.
But now here's my own notes that I typed out. So
okay,
they're on a nice bright white background. So there were just a couple more case files that were out there, and I actually found them not on Fold 3, but in the Wayback Machine.
Sweet.
In like an archive. They weren't like Fold 3. They weren't detailed. They were only a few pages. I'm not sure where they came from, but they looked official. They looked like the documents and papers you see on Fold 3. I think they were legit.
Okay.
Is what I'm saying. So one of them was on November 14th. From 6:30 to 6:41, someone observed a white object in the distance that then faded from view. Now, this was actually an air policeman. He was taking tickets from servicemen who were boarding a bus, and apparently they were also commenting on it. He said it appeared to be a star, but it did not behave like a star. So the conclusion that officials would reach is, of course, it was Venus.
Of course.
Of course it was Venus. But here's my argument. It was not behaving like a star. He doesn't elaborate, but that means something. He saw something that triggered an emotion or a reaction so strong that he felt he needed to go and report it and file a report right away.
Yeah. And this, I'm always skeptical of these Venus explanations because you have an adult who's seen stars in this night sky every night of their life. The stars are always there. And yet for this one night, for whatever reason, you know, Venus normally, if you can see it and it's bright, it looks like a star, a very bright star, but you can't look at it and be like, okay, that's a planet unless you know your stuff. It just looks like a bright star.
Right.
So why would you go outside and be like, you know, I've been outside every other night of my life and I've seen the stars, but this night in particular, I'm going to look up at the stars and freak out on this one particular one.
Right.
Know?
Like, how was it different? Was it flickering more than you would expect?
Yeah.
Was it, you know, brighter than you would expect? Like, what exactly? How is it different?
Yeah, exactly. Let's take a break here.
Oh, okay.
Agent Ether has to turn off her phone alarm, which is unfortunately going to show up in the recording, so I'm going to have to apologize for that ahead of time. Hopefully it's not too annoying, but we're going to take a slight pause. She has to go give our cryptids. One of our cryptid needs medication twice a day because he has seizures, so we got to give him seizure medication to keep the poor little guy safe. But so she's going to go do that right now. She gets the morning shift. I get the morning shift. She gets the evening shift so that we both remember to do it. So we sort of join forces on that. And and he hasn't had a seizure for a long time since we've been giving him his medication, so it all works out. All right, Agent Ether is back. What's cooking, Agent Ether?
Good luck in your edits there.
I know, right? Oh, so we had actually Mr. Ponk found for us for PMO. He says a project management office is a department within an organization that standardizes and documents the best project management techniques. The PMO sets the scopes for projects, trains staff, and tracks the metrics for all processes, and then it goes on and on and on. Or Prime Minister's office.
I don't think it's the Prime Minister's office.
I would find that unlikely, yeah.
Actually, that's pretty close to wrapping it up. There's just one more case file I found, and it was in Friday, November 7th or 8th. They weren't clear. That's what they wrote on the case file. I'm sure I could go back in time and look up that actual date and figure out which one it was, since they say it was on a Friday. But it happened at 6 p.m., and it was very similar to the story of November 14th, where someone saw a bright object in the distance and basically said it wasn't a star. It was something, but it wasn't a star.
Yeah. And I guess if it was moving in a strange, erratic way, and they say, how did it move? And you're like, I'm not really sure how it moved, but it wasn't a star, you know? I guess maybe it would make sense if you look at it that way.
Yeah, maybe. So I just thought this was a really interesting case. I was really surprised that there wasn't any information on it outside of Fold 3, considering how many people saw it, how many sightings there were.
Yeah.
The fact that it was in a major newspaper.
Well, and if you have if you have a number of witnesses, there are probably people who didn't report it who also saw it. So you think there'd be just more evidence around of it, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I like how the government ended up drawing multiple conclusions too. They had to explain each sighting differently. They're, on this date it must have been this, on this date it must have been that. It just so happens that all of these things coincided and all of these sightings happened within this period.
Yeah.
Within 10 days in November.
Agent Redacted's over there trying to rile up the cryptids.
Why?
Knock it off, Agent Redacted. I could see your reflection in the TV. You're not fooling anybody. All right, sorry. I just wanted to tell him to knock it off. So is that what you got for us, Agent Ether?
That's what I got on the pages and notes.
That was a pretty good case. You were worried it wouldn't be enough material, but that was pretty good. That was a really good case that I had never heard of. And it has, my favorite thing is multiple independent witnesses, because that's better than anything, really. You have people who probably had no chance to corroborate ahead of time, all reporting the same or similar things. So we know that something unusual happened, although it doesn't necessarily tell us what.
That means I get to name it.
Okay.
I'm just, I'm going to call it the Shiroi UFO flap of 1957.
Oh, that's such an original name.
Okay, then I will call it the Agent Ether flap.
Okay, good. The
of
Agent,
1957.
although there's many ways you can interpret that, but I'm sure people will assume it's a UFO. Okay, so all right, now let's get back to the show.
Or you can just buy it on PayPal.
Buy what?
Cryptocurrency.
Apparently,
on PayPal. I was thinking actually, so I used to buy lotto tickets for my girlfriends around the holidays. It's easy, it's fun, like scratchers.
Yeah.
Scratchers and Powerball and what have you. And then I was like, I could buy them crypto through PayPal.
Yeah. But don't get Bitcoin though.
Why not?
Well, because I think that Bitcoin is, there was a time when it was like you could get it for like a penny per Bitcoin, and it's gone up to like, $20,000. But the days of it going from like $20,000 to like $20 million, I don't think that's going to happen anymore. So it's going to go up or down, but not by as much as it has been. Probably it's going to stabilize a little bit in the long term. So instead, you want to get them some of these really weird altcoins, get them like, I don't know, get them some Dogecoin, something like that, that it's like the lottery, because most of those coins end up becoming worthless, or they already are worthless. But once in a great while, one of them does become valuable, at least temporarily, before becoming worthless again. So it's kind of like playing the lottery, You
I
get them,
could gift them some NFTs
yeah,
too.
get them $5 over here. I'm going to look up anybody interested. You can go to Coin Market Cap, Coin Market Cap, and that lists pretty much all the cryptocurrencies. So let's go to Coin Market Cap, and you can look at the cryptocurrencies by, I don't know.
Can you search them?
You can search them. You can list them
Search unicorn. Let's see if there's a unicorn.
There's a unicorn. Yeah. You can search them based on like the market cap or the price, or you can search them based on, a couple of different criteria. So let's go to it's listing them in order. I think it's listing them in order of market cap. Let's see. Yeah, market cap's descending. So let's look at I don't know, pick a number above 100.
101.
101. Oh, that's fun. Okay. So coin number 101 is Holo coin, HOLO. The ticker or short symbol, I guess, is HOT. The current price is $0.001614. And the market cap is actually $279,000. No, is that $279 million? My goodness, that's a lot. No way. That's crazy.
Lies, I tell you, lies.
That's a lot. That's market cap can be deceptive, but that's a conversation for another time. And then there's Bitcoin Gold is all the way down to number 104. So I guess in the top 100 we're still got some prominent coins. No. So what I'm talking about is not something with such a high market cap because money's already been put into those. Let's see. I'm going to go to ... Let's see, go to page 6, go down a little bit. Let's talk about coin.
You too can invest your life savings and watch it all go to ruin.
Yeah. Let's go to coin number 515, GMT token. Okay. This one has a bit of a small, that's still a fairly large market cap though. Let's see where we go.
Do they all have symbols? Is there some sort of,
most of them do. Yeah.
Here, is this one? Can I take a peek?
You can come over and take a look. Yeah. Here, this is still too much money. I'm going, let's go to page 8 here. Oh my gosh, there's so many cryptocurrencies. Okay. So let's see here. Now we're at some smaller market caps. These are only in like the 9 million kind of range. So let's pick something it's under 10 million now, I guess. So let's pick coin number 750, 58. This is YKey Chain. The WICC, it's $0.0394 per coin, $8 million market cap, and then it lists some other particulars of the coin. And this coin could spike someday randomly. You don't know. It's possible. Some others in this area are Bucks token, RFox. Oh, here's lossless coin. That's why lossless coin. That's what I wanted, some lossless coin. It's a perfect idea. Here's whale coin. Whale coin is worth only $7 million total. So yeah, anyways.
That's still a lot of money. That boggles my mind that enough people have invested in these altcoins that there's money in them.
Well, here's the thing about market cap. Market cap is very deceptive, okay? So let's say, hypothetically, that I make a coin and I issue 1 million tokens, okay? Now, the first token that I issue or that I sells for $1. Right? Now let's say I sell 10 more tokens. So I've sold like 11 tokens total and I've sold them. They got a little bit more. So let's say the last one I sold went for $2 million or for $2, right? So the last sale was $2. So the market cap is now going to be $2 million.
I see.
But I've only sold like, let's say $20 worth of coins. You see what I'm saying?
That's silly.
So the market cap could be $20 million and yet only $50 of coins have sold. So that market cap is not necessarily a useless metric, but it can be very, very deceptive. You have to combine it with some other metrics like volume and some other stuff to get the whole picture of what's going on. Any individual data point by itself is more or less worthless when you're talking about this kind of stuff. So that doesn't mean that people have put $8 million or $7 million into this coin. That just means that there's, 9 million coins out there or whatever. And then, so it can be very deceptive, but all right.
Like you said, it's a lottery.
Yeah. Anyways, go buy your friend some King Dag coin. Maybe it'll be worth something at some point. You can Google it. You can do a search for whatever coin you want, and chances are somebody's come up with a coin of that idea, already. Although I did find a coin that nobody had made yet I was surprised that I might actually issue my own coin just for fun and give it out to our listeners for free. You too can own this coin. I'm not going to say what it is because then somebody else will do it and make my own worthless coin. All right, let's get back to Project Bluebook. That was quite the diversion there. But I feel like since Agent ETA is not here, I have to do the tangents, That's his job, is to do the tangents. All right, next up, we have a file from... it's the title, or most of them in fold 3, it'll give like the location or whatever is like the name of the thing. It's filed under location or whatever. So this one is 26.58 north, 154.46 east in the Pacific. And it was on the 11th of January, 1966. It was military witnesses, and it was one object. It was a 3-minute total observation and listed as a ground visual sighting. The course was to the southeast, and the location was the Pacific Ocean. This is just from the title card, or the cover card that summarizes everything. The conclusion? Any guesses, Agent Ether?
Ooh, I'm gonna guess aircraft.
No. Close though. Satellite decay of the Cosmos 53 satellite.
Oh.
Now, that sounds like, okay, that would look really weird, but this is a 3-minute observation. Would a satellite decaying in the atmosphere last for 3 minutes? That sounds doubtful to me, but maybe. I don't know. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's look at the summary and all the particulars. So the brief summary of on the title, on the cover card or whatever, is: object was described as being cigar-shaped, glowing with a bright light at its head, a glowing body with a duller light aft, and a long fiery tail. Its flight path was described as coming from the horizon on the starboard beam. It approached to within 1 mile at a height of 400 feet, then altered course to a position off the starboard quarter, where it appeared to hover for approximately 30 seconds, then went to the port quarter and gradually disappeared. So yeah, that sounds like a satellite decaying, right? And then it says, the ship was steering at 257 degrees gyro, 258 degrees north. So the ship was maneuvering during part of this sighting. And it says that in the card as if that, so if you have a stationary object, but the ship is turning, then that could make the object look like it's turning, especially when you're out at sea at night and you have no reference point whatsoever, and you might not know that the ship is turning. That might make the object look like it's going around the ship when in fact the object is stationary and the ship is turning, right? So that's kind of what they're trying to say on the title card. No, it was just a satellite decaying. The ship was turning, giving it the illusion or whatever. But let's look a little bit further into this, and we can say whether or not we believe that based on further information. So page 2 is a communication from Commander of U.S. Naval Defense Forces Eastern Pacific to Commander ATIC Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Dayton, Ohio. The reason I notated that is because this was not just some sergeant reporting this. This was the commander of the U.S. Naval Defense Forces of the Eastern Pacific. This is a guy with a big swinging dick, as Agent...
That does sound like something he would say.
Agent ETA would say. Again, I'm trying to represent him because he's not here. No, but this is like a very important person. And these people, they don't just report frivolous stuff, right? They have careers to worry about. They have the defense of our nation to worry about. They don't bother reporting meteors and comet fragments or whatever, right? So I thought that was interesting that was who was, one of the people involved in this anyways. So on here he has at 11:12:00Z, which I'm assuming that's some sort of Zulu, but there's a couple of extra digits there. Position 26-58 north, 154-46 east. Watch sighted 200-foot cigar-shaped silent UFO at 400-foot height. Approached 1 mile starboard beam, then hovered starboard quarter, then to port quarter and away. Visible 3 minutes. Executed Williamson search for possible downplane 1 hour. Phenomenon inexplicable. Airmail witness report signed Master. So I looked it up. The Williamson maneuver is basically a U-turn for a ship. If a ship wants to make a U-turn, they do it in a very specific way, and they call that a Williamson maneuver, I guess. So at the bottom of the page is like a handwritten notes about some kind of satellite decay. It's very faint and hard to read, but it's about a satellite decay and maybe about the position of that satellite. The next page appears to be a witnessed account of the event, and it's very, very sad that this is illegible. Like, it's very hard to read. You can read words here and there, but you cannot read the whole thing. And I think this is the main witness statement. And I just sort of really bummed out that you can't read this, because this is where all the meat is. The specific witness statement, not the summary, but the witness statement, that's the important thing. And we have multiple witnesses for this one, 3 witnesses, I think. But that page is not readable, really, unfortunately. But the next page, we have a statement of Glenn G. Petrye, Petrye, who's the master, I guess like the supervisor. His statement is, he was in the bunk around 2200 when he heard the clatter of feet on the bridge grating over him. The phone rang and Mr. Anderson, third mate, reported what appeared to be a plane afire on the port quarter. He ran to the bridge but didn't see anything. The witness ran to the bridge but didn't see anything. So the reason this is important is because you have people reporting a plane that it looks like maybe a plane that's on fire or crashing. So in other words, they're seeing the object before the ship makes its maneuver, before it makes its Williamson turn. So they see something that they think might be a downed ship in the distance. So then they turn the ship around to go look for it. So the timing here is critical to the story. So they didn't see the object while the ship was turning. So the summary page is misrepresenting what the witnesses said, right? So we have a witness here who says that they saw or they heard people running around and stuff reacting to what they were seeing before the ship turned around. Very, very important detail here, okay? At 2201, the ship started to execute a Williamson turn. The bow lookout was doubled and a search was made using a searchlight. The witness writing this realized that during the search that he had heard no sound such as a plane would have made. So he was in his bunk and he was like, okay, there's a bunch of people running around being crazy. And then it says, okay, let's turn around and look for a crashed plane. But then he's like, there was no crashed plane. If it was close enough for them to look for, you would have heard the sound of a plane. He didn't hear any plane sounds. He didn't hear anything. It was completely silent. That's kind of a strange detail. He asked somebody else who had seen the object, and that person said that the object had maneuvered 180 degrees around the ship without making any sound. And they looked for the thing, and at about 2258, the ship made another U-turn and resumed the original course, continuing the search. At 2300, the witness writing the master, Glenn, took statements from each of the witnesses, Mr. Anderson, an R. Clonch, and a J. Fachem, Fachm, Fachem. And he said, the statements were taken individually, and I did not seek to make them agree. Now, I'm guessing those statements are on the page that is illegible, unfortunately. The next page is some drawings of the ship's position and the UFO, and it's got some little notes and handwritten stuff on there. The final page is mostly blank with a big blocky stamp it's stamped priority on the page. There's some faint writing on the page that's really hard to make out, but in one spot it appears that 100-foot cigar shape is handwritten. And there's a few other things, like something about priority, but I can't really make it out, or something above priority, but I can't really make out what it says. In another place, there's a word that's underlined. It might be rain or pan or Paul or whatever. It's really hard to tell what it says, but there's some handwritten stuff on that page. And if this was not anything, it was just a satellite entry, then why would it have priority? I don't know. It's sort of one of these things where the conclusion doesn't match the case file. And that's, like I said at the beginning, it's a good idea to read through these case files not necessarily rely on what the cover page says.
Sure. No, it's definitely true.
Yeah. Let's see where are we at here?
We're at 120.
Oh, 120. Wow. A little bit of that is going to be cut out. Just a little. Maybe I'll do one more. Yeah, maybe I'll do one more here. So the next file I have notes on is 4204 North, 7356 West, Sagittarius, New York, or Saugerties. That's not Sagittarius. That's Saugerties. How would you say that, Agent Ether?
I wouldn't.
Okay. Somewhere in New York on the 16th of January. This one had civilian witnesses, and it was one large object and three smaller objects saw for 1 hour and 30 minutes. The witnesses described it as a white football-shaped object, one large object and possibly three smaller objects moving out of the larger object and off to the west. It was sighted at a 30-degree elevation in the northwest and disappeared to the west by fading from sight. Now, the conclusion is Jupiter. And at first, this sounds somewhat reasonable, but, because Jupiter has moons that are sort of visible, although I'm not sure if the moons of Jupiter are visible to the naked eye.
Some people say they are.
I don't know. Maybe
I don't have very good vision, so they're not to me.
Maybe if you had great vision and you had really good conditions and you weren't, anywhere near a city, no light pollution and all that stuff, I suppose it's possible. I don't know.
I'm going to look it up later on the Googly machine to see if it's possible.
Yeah, totally. But also, Jupiter, it's not football shaped, right? So I don't know. That's kind of weird. And now, the reason why I think that, so again, the cover page says Jupiter, and you're like, that could be Jupiter. But when you read the file, the witness says that, like we're talking about this form that's really awesome. It says that the object was approximately the size of a dime at arm's length. So think about that. A dime at arm's length. There are no condition that's possible for Jupiter to be that big. Think about that. What do you think, Agent Ether?
I think it was Jupiter.
A dime at arm's length? Football shaped? That's huge. Jupiter never looks that big.
It was a bird.
At 30 degrees elevation?
Light reflecting off the bottom stomach of a bird.
With orbs coming in and out of it?
Definitely a bird.
So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it could be Jupiter, I suppose, but when you look at what the observers or witnesses are saying, it doesn't really make sense. And the witness says in the form, what first called their attention was the brightness of the object and the movement of the object. Guess what, guys? Jupiter and its moons, they're not moving around. They appear stationary, more or less. They move very, very slowly, in the night sky. And the witness said the flight path was that it moved westerly and back to northwest where it was first observed, and then it repeated this course several times. Again, Jupiter doesn't do that. There were two witnesses, names redacted, but one was identified as a writer for IBM and a housewife. So I'm guessing the witness's wife and the
hubby wife
reporter.
team.
Hmm?
Hubby wife team.
Yeah.
What?
And the way it's written, it appears that the husband was the one reporting the UFO, and then they were saying that their wife was also there. So here's a quote from the report. I believe that the UFOs seen by these people may have been a phenomenon associated with the temperature inversion. New York State Police confirmed the sighting. 2 patrolmen saw the object. Okay, so that's not from the witness. That's just from the report. But it's interesting they note that some police officers also confirmed the sighting. And it's like, dude, how often have you seen on like the local 6 o'clock news? And in this news, 3 police officers on patrol reported seeing Jupiter in the night sky. It's just weird to me that it wasn't Jupiter. Come on. It was not Jupiter. And this file also says that possibly one photograph, which has not yet been developed, redacted will forward same if it turns out. So there's apparently a photograph taken, but there's no photograph in the file. So either the photograph turned out to be completely blank, or it was lost, or something else happened to it. Who knows? So this I had a note in here for something else that I forgot was in there that didn't make sense. Okay, anyways. So that was a short one, but there's not much there to go on, but it was probably not Jupiter. And I guess we'll just leave it at that. So let's see. We have, okay, I don't have too much more. I have one more, I think, so we might as well get through it while we're here. This one is from Burbank, Ohio on the 3rd of January. It was a civilian, one object, 5-minute sighting, and it was a ground visual. The conclusion on the cover card said, something has been crossed. Oh, yeah, these are my notes here. Sorry, I shouldn't read these verbatim. I'm trying to hurry up is why. So what caught my eye on this one is the conclusion was redacted. I've never seen that before.
I haven't either.
But on the conclusion box on the cover, they had it looked like they had crossed something out. And then there's a word written in satellite. So the one thing, something is crossed out with like a thick black marker, like what you'd use for redacting something. And then there's the word satellite is in that box, but that's crossed out. And then they have in there handwritten, probable airplane, and then a check mark after that. It's handwritten in the box. So I'm like, dude, what? They had no idea for this one. They're
like, we don't know.
Yeah, there's possibly 3 explanations. 2 of them crossed out, 1 of them redacted, which I've never seen before in a file. A conclusion redact. That's just really weird to me. I've never seen that. That really caught my attention. So I really wanted to look at this one. So the brief summary on the front card is, object appeared in the north-northeast and disappeared in the south-southwest on a straight and level course. Object appeared as a white light. No wings or exhaust and no noise was observed. Observer was moving in an auto at the time. And then handwritten under this is, after checking map and observer's sketch, it was found that the object was traveling east. And then a big X. East is underlined twice. So I'm not sure why they would handwrite like a big X there, and I'm not sure why they would underline east twice, but maybe they wanted any potential reader to be extra aware of the fact. I don't know. So then we have the questionnaire that we've mentioned before. 10:20 p.m. on Interstate 71. Item number 14, did the object disappear while you were watching it? Yes, it came from north-northeast and disappeared south-southwest on a straight, direct course. No sound, bright white light. Item number 18, we wish to know the angular size. Hold a matchstick at arm's length in line with the known object and note how much of the object is covered by the head of the match. If you had performed this experiment at the time of the sighting, how much of the object would have been covered by the match head? And then the witness says about a quarter of the object. Object would be a half a match long. So that's pretty big. Box number 19, draw a picture, label, etc. So they drew a picture of 2 rectangles with arrows pointing to the right and only one object, but it seemed to get longer as it got closer. So there's 2 rectangles, one bigger than the other. And they were indicating that the object got bigger as it got closer. And it says, or they wrote, only one object, but it seemed to get longer as it got closer. No vapor trail was left behind as an airplane leaves. No wings, no protrusions, no exhaust or vapor trails, although it could have seemed to be part of the object as it got longer and closer. This was all handwritten by the witness. I'm not sure what they mean by this, but maybe they're saying, I guess it's possible there's a vapor trail, but what they drew was just like a rectangle. It was no vapor trail or anything. So I don't know, it's kind of weird. They estimate the speed at 500 miles an hour and estimated the object was 5 miles away. And it says 5 miles away, but since they said it came overhead, basically, that has to be like when it started, when they first sighted the object, not the whole time. Okay, in box number 26, it says, in order that you can give as clear a picture as possible of what you saw, describe in your own words a common object or objects which, when placed up in the sky, would give the same appearance as the object you saw. And it says, a thick, short cigar. So,
one of those cigar UFOs.
Yeah,
I've heard of those.
Yeah, but a thick, short cigar, which is, so, and plus when because they drew a rectangle, maybe not like a rounded ends, more like, I don't know. So box 27 says, indicates it was about, that's the one where they have like the pointing hands and the compass to indicate the elevation and stuff. It's about 40 degrees elevation, and that they first saw it to the north-northeast, and then they saw it to the south-southwest. or left to the south-southwest. Box 28, they drew its path, and they drew it passing over Highway 71. And box 31, was anyone else with you? Yes, and they also saw the object, and that was the wife, name redacted. Box 35, information you feel pertinent and which is not adequately covered in the specific points of the questionnaire or a narrative explanation of your sighting. And there's a drawing of the path of the UFO, and then it's written in there, we saw a bright white light to our left and ahead. At first we thought it might be an airplane, but it was too big and it seemed to get longer. Probably because it was getting closer. Perhaps it was turning. I don't know. That was my thought. Like, as it gets closer, it appears to get longer, right? Maybe they saw it sort of turned or rotated, and as it got closer, it was also rotating. So maybe that's why it got bigger, or maybe it just got bigger because it was approaching them very rapidly. I don't know. So anyways, but it was too big and it seemed to get, but it was big and it seemed to get longer, probably because it was getting closer. It was not an airplane. We slowed down to watch it. It was on a direct course, stayed at the same height, got brighter as it got closer, and then disappeared flying south-southwest. Then the last page of the file, page 10, is a handwritten note from the witness. Concerning UFOs, the recent activity in Michigan prompts me to write to you. At 10:20 p.m. on the evening of January 3rd, 1966, my wife and I saw something similar. Now, I'm assuming that they mean the Michigan swamp gas case, which, if you're interested, go ahead and listen to episode number 1 of the podcast. I say we, but I was by myself on that one. But that's what I'm assuming they're talking about here. It seemed to fly a course from north-northeast to south-southeast at a standard height. It did not vary. We were on Interstate 71, 2 miles east of State Highway 76 at Burbank. It was solid white or light, like a cigar. I wrote to David Dieter, science editor of the Cleveland Press. He thought it might be a vapor trail. It was not. It did not go up or down, but disappeared on a straight course. So that's pretty much that file in a nutshell. But I thought that was a really fascinating case, and it really grabbed my attention that it was the conclusion was redacted. What was the original conclusion that would be redacted? It's just, I've never seen that before. It's just completely bizarre. I can't make any sense of that. It's weird. What do you think, Agent Ether?
I think that, I don't know. I think it's like a diamond in the rough. Like, what are the odds that you would stumble over that?
I know. Yeah.
You know, looking through, like you said, there's so many files. So what are the odds you would come across that? That's really fantastic.
Yeah. And this one, the conclusion was probable airplane. And I don't think I said, but I'm in this one somewhere, I didn't take notes of it, but somewhere in the witness said not an airplane. And this is something you'll see over and over again, where the witness will say specifically, they'll say in their statement, this was not an airplane, but the cover card will say airplane. This was an aircraft. And then the witness specifically says, this is not an aircraft. I work at an Air Force base. I saw that it was not an aircraft, but that happens over and over again in the files. Anyways, so that was that. All right, hour 36. So it's not too bad. We're over a little bit than our normal go, but hey, we had plenty of material.
Plenty of stuff. There's so much stuff in these files that, like, I want to do a ton more of these. I just don't know that everybody wants to listen to a bunch of these. So I try to space them out, but man, I love these Blue Book files. So we're going to do more of them. Hopefully you guys like listening to them, because there are so many good witness statements in there, so many good cases that you couldn't possibly cover them all. Like I said, over 12,000 in 1966 alone. Not all of them are good, but many of them are. Any final thoughts, Agent Ether? Well, I had a lot of fun. What can I say? Another great episode.
Yeah, it's fun just digging through these, just looking at stuff, right?
Yeah, I ended up spending a lot more time than I planned to, because the Blue Book files, it's pretty easy to dig in and find something and do a little summary. But then I found this case and Oh boy.
Right down that rabbit hole, right?
Oh man, it was like hours of sifting through it, and the time just flew by.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I love looking through this stuff. All right, that's about all we got for you this week. If you enjoyed the show, you could really help us out by leaving a good review wherever you listen to podcasts and telling your friends about the show.
Keep it strange.
Oh, wait. Also, I forgot. We have a new Patreon subscriber.
Oh.
So our Patreon is fairly new. So we don't have a ton of subscribers yet, but we had a new one and I wanted to give him a shout out. So hold on. I should have pulled this up ahead of time, but let me pull our Patreon up so that I can give a shout out to our new Patreon subscriber. What do we got here? Where do I find that? I'm not even familiar with the interface yet here. Oh yeah, okay. Here we go. Sarah Jorgensen is a new Patreon subscriber. Thanks a lot. We really appreciate your support and I hope you enjoy the Patreon. We appreciate you so much. Thank you. And once again, keep it strange.
You can't steal my line.
Well, I mean, you already said it, so. All right. And also to the Patreon subscribers, we usually do an after hours, but Agent Ether, I'm assuming, is going to run off somewhere as she does after the show.
I got to put the kids to bed.
And Agent ETA and Kruger are not here, so I could just talk to myself for a little while for the after hours for Patreon, but that might be kind of weird. So no after hours this time, unfortunately, but hopefully next time. So we'll catch you guys next time.
Bye.